Hello, everyone. This is Richard Kazami from the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association. Thank you for joining us. This will be our last meeting until our summer break, much deserved, is coming up. And we have a great program today. To go over briefly, Old Astoria Neighborhood Association, our mission is to promote communications between residents and city agencies, private business, and or developers, charities, and elected officials. We also give input on zoning and city planning decisions and enforcement that affects the character of our neighborhood. We promote local business environment for economic growth and neighborhood reinvestment, enhance the cultural health of the neighborhood, both for artistic achievement and promotion, and in relations to the various ethnic groups. And lastly, we try and promote security and quality of life. So now you have it there in a nutshell. We'd like to also thank both the borough president and our city council person, Tiffany Caban, for funding. We greatly appreciate it. With that, it's been an interesting month. It's great to see summer again. I know I was down on the waterfront area by Hallett's last week, extremely busy, extremely bustling, people all over the place. It was wonderful to see. It's great to see everything coming to life, and especially to see the kayaks back. That was great to see also. So, couple of things that happened. Last weekend, we had a cleanup at the Whitey Ford Field. We had a lot of participation. It was including our association, the Friends of the Whitey Ford Field, Frank Sinatra High School, and the Queens Legged Softball Association all participated with our council member, Tiffany Caban. So we did our best to get this field ready for use as soon as possible. We have had some issues with, even though it's been closed, some dog owners have been cutting the fence to get in, and that does cause issues in terms of trying to keep the field in a playable condition. But we do hope that as time goes on, we're going to keep on top of maintenance, and it will end up being the wonderful spot for people to view, people to visit, and for some great games. There's nothing like hitting a softball right towards Hellgate and seeing it go in between the two bridges, at least visually. So that's great. Also, if you remember last meeting, we had a presentation by a bus owner here, school bus owner who had big problems with vandalism in her facility, and to the point where it's also becoming an existential threat, which is what we hate to see. There's a recent program, which I won't go into in detail, but we're going to post the link to it in the chat if you're interested in seeing it. This was put together by the district attorney's office as a way to try and be able to deal with problems like this. So we're looking for progress on it. Everybody's rights must be maintained, but we also need to maintain the right of businesses, particularly small businesses, to do their business in a secure fashion. Okay, that being said, that's our brief intros. We're very lucky to have with us our new state senator, Kristen Gonzalez. And if I'd like to bring her up if possible, it's great to see her again. Last time we saw each other on this was, I think, during the debate, correct?
Yeah. We were just talking about how I think it's been a year at this point, but it feels really good to be back and catching up.
Good. Yeah. And it must have been a real interesting year for you. You've got your first year under your belt up in Albany. And from what I read in the media, you seem to be, knocking it out of the park. You seem to be doing quite well, speaking of Whitey Ford Field. So, I'm glad to see that. I know we need strong representation, not just for the macro issues, but the micro issues. They're just as important. They say all politics is local, but we're very local. So we look forward to your support to deal with our issues that we have. So. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I really do appreciate the the intro and the nod. We've been hard at work in this first year, and I think that's what we're doing, right? The nature of this job is you have 6 months of a legislative session where I am living in Albany half the week, during the session, then coming back to the district. So you're kind of back and forth. And now we're back here full time. So it's been a big balance between making sure we're up in Albany legislating, fighting for all of these like large coalition battles, but then also, we've been organizing in the district around the hyper local issues like traffic violence that we're seeing. We had a lot of deaths throughout our district, unfortunately, and so we've been working with the Department of Transportation, and you might have seen us in Astoria. We've been tabling and canvassing to get people to fill out the DOT surveys and have their feedback, incorporated in this very hyper local process. So, we've been doing both, and I'm also, happy to give a little bit of a recap if that's helpful of how things went in Albany for folks who may want it.
Good. As a matter of fact, I forgot to mention this earlier to anybody watching. If you have any questions of any of the presenters, just type them in the chat, into the stream, and we will see them, and we will, I'll read them off and hand it off to you, and you go with it. So tell me about some of your legislation that you put out this year and that you supported.
Yeah, absolutely. So just again, a reminder, we have this I'm a new state senator. It's a new district, right? It's a 3-borough district. We have Queens, Astoria along that city. We also have Brooklyn and Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and then Manhattan from 14th Street to 42nd Street. So we got Gramercy, Kipsway, Sci-Town. So it's a pretty big district. But the things that unify us and really, were what fueled us in Albany are the housing crisis. We represent some of the priciest real estate in the entire city and entire state. And so a lot of us are just struggling with the rising cost of living, the rising cost of rent. And so our primary fight was around housing this year, especially bills like good cause eviction that, create real tenant protections for all the housing that's being built in our district. We're talking about a housing crisis. We're developed in Senate District 59. We're adding new housing to the market. We want to make sure that if we're adding new housing to the market, that the people who move in are protected, and through bills like good cause eviction have the right to renew their lease and a cap on how much their rent can be raised at the end of the lease. Because you have all these market rate units where you get, $800, $1,000 increases, and that's equivalent to an eviction for a lot of New Yorkers, right? We can't afford that. Our wages aren't going up the same. So we fought for that bill and fought a lot for housing. We also are united in this district by climate, because being on the waterfront, we not only have to keep an eye for a sustainable and protected waterfront, we also got to keep an eye for the power plants that we have here in Astoria. So we very much were pushing for climate legislation, a just transition to renewable energy, and bills like the Build Public Renewables Act, which we did get passed this year. It's a huge win that gives the New York Power Authority the right to build its own publicly operated, publicly owned renewable energy sources. So those are two of the biggest priorities. And, for more information for folks in the district on my personal placement in the legislature, I am the chair of Internet and Technology. I'm a former tech worker. So being able to chair the Senate's Technology Committee meant that we took on a lot of legislation around cybersecurity, because we're seeing a lot of hackers and ransomware attacks. We want to make sure our data is protected in New York State. So we passed legislation like the Secure Data Act, which I carried personally and got through the Senate. We carried legislation around privacy, and ensuring that we have multi-factor authentication. That basically means that when you're logging in, it's a little safer because there's a multi-step process to log in. And we introduced bills around. And now actually algorithmic bias, artificial intelligence, so we're taking that on. I'm also while I chaired the Internet and Technology Committee, I'm on the Energy Committee. So that was a big part of the things I mentioned with Build Public Renewables and fighting for climate legislation. I'm on the Disabilities Committee. So we were able to, advocate for legislation that really acknowledges that our city is not built for those who are differently abled in so many ways. I'm on the Transportation Committee. A big priority this year was fix the MTA. And I'm really proud to say we won investment in our MTA also around accessibility. But in addition to that, we won 5 free bus routes. So for the first time, we're going to have now, 1 bus route per borough as a pilot, and we're going to see if we can continue to expand it so that our MTA or public transit is affordable, right, and accessible for folks. So that was another one. I'm also on ethics, but basically, what all of this to say that my priorities not only were the big coalition ones throughout the budget, but pertaining to the specific committees that I chair and am sitting on. And happy to get more into any of those if folks have questions.
Mhm. Okay, what do you see coming up for the next session, or your priorities, or your goals in that group exactly? Do you have any ideas on what you want to work on, and what kind of input you're looking for from the community now to go ahead? Are you having any events like town halls or anything like that where you can do outreach?
That's a great question. So we did do a post-budget town hall, and this is the thing I always try to drive home to, because every level of government is working on a different thing, has a different process. So it's not intuitive what to track based on what elected you're looking at, what level of government, right?
Mhm.
In the state level, we have one of the biggest obligations is the state budget, which is about $227 billion a year. And it would be one of the largest economies in the world if New York was its own state. So our responsibility starts early in session, like February and March, where we work with the Senate, the state Senate, to create our own version of the budget. The Assembly creates their own version of the budget, and the executive, our governor, introduces her version. And in order to get our priorities represented, we need to make sure, and this is what I did this year, we made sure that housing legislation we talked about was in the one house budget, right? We made sure the climate legislation was there. We made sure the MTA legislation was there. But where the fight happens is once you have those 3 versions, the governor, the leader of the Senate, and the speaker of the Assembly go into 3-way negotiations. And it's taken out of the elected's hands, and it's really on those 3 leaders to come to the agreement on the final budget, and then we vote on it. And there were a lot of controversial things that the governor put forward this year. She didn't want to budge on housing, so she kicked housing out of the budget altogether, which is pretty unheard of. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we'll need in the second half of this year from everyone here who will need you to be involved around housing. But she had some concerning things. She had, lifting the charter school cap, which our public schools are already struggling. It's not something this district necessarily wanted to see. We got a lot of emails and phone calls from constituents who are not happy about the proposal. She introduced legislation around public safety that really didn't address the root cause of the issues. You want to make sure we're investing in our communities. Her version of the budget didn't do that. Instead, it focused on things like pretrial detention. You don't even have a conviction. You're waiting for trial for years. You're accused, not proven guilty. And we wanted to make it fair so that, people who are wealthy in the city, they can pay to sit at home and wait. But if you're working class and you haven't been convicted, you can't pay, right? If you can't make your bill, you're not able to pay. So she had a really severe, proposal for that again, doesn't really address the issue. And she had some other, proposals that didn't represent this district. Ultimately, like I said, we ended up, we didn't lift the charter school cap. We ended up taking 25 zombies offline, but we did win, universal school lunches. We won, as I mentioned, around climate, so BPRA. We won around, when it came to specific things in housing, emergency rental assistance program for NYCHA residents. So we got significant investment for any of our NYCHA Astoria houses tenants who may be behind in rent, and also significant investment in infrastructure upgrades for NYCHA. But we didn't win on tenant protections. And so the second half of this year, I had a budget town hall where we went through all of this. But what we're going to need is this district, especially Astoria, where rent prices have doubled and tripled in the last couple of years, to really be engaged, work with us as we're going to have more organizing opportunities around advocating for good cause eviction. We're going to be probably doing more worked with our office one-on-one. Constituent services, reach out to us if you have trouble with your landlord. That helps us track the issue too, and bring real data, for next year. And I think the last big thing I would say, in addition to staying engaged around housing in preparation for next year, I would say around traffic violence and street safety. If you're concerned, you want to make sure that everyone's safe, pedestrians, bikers, and drivers are all safe, then we are, we've been tabling, like I mentioned, would love to get your thoughts and would love you all. And I think we can share this maybe in the next newsletter, the next newsletter for this organization, the link to the Department of Transportation survey in Astoria so that you have a chance to have your voice heard and we get additional infrastructure investment from the DOT to our neighborhood to help make everyone safe. And I think those are the two biggest things.
Good. We've taken certain positions here, which you may or may not agree with, but like your opinion on them. Number one, we're just talking about the traffic controls, the transportation issues. We've just felt that, that no bike lanes should be constructed, okay? And all the old bike lanes should be brought up to speed in terms of traffic controls. I don't think there should be a corner that doesn't have a light for the bicycles, a light for the automobiles, and have them, give time for people to make turns. This is something we think is very, very important. That's an infrastructure issue. We'd love to see what you think about that and whether you would support that, because I think it's very important. And then one other thing was, let's say on the good cause eviction, is there, at one time there was going to be a carve out for people that were for buildings when the owners actually fit within the buildings. I want to know if that still exists. And one reason why I think that's a very good idea, okay, is beyond the fact of just the dollars and cents. One of the main things that makes a neighborhood go downhill as quickly as possible is when it's all the owners move out. They're no longer there to take care of the buildings. Something like this, as an additional consequence that people don't think about, is you're going to incentivize people to live in their buildings, to stay there, to take care of the neighborhood, to watch out for stuff. Absentee landlords is the worst thing that can happen to a neighborhood, worse than almost anything else. So that is something that might come about with that carve out. That's actually, I think, a positive. So I hope you consider that.
Yeah. Yeah. We had this conversation, and in the final version of this bill, in the tenant or housing package that the Senate and the Assembly negotiated and then brought after the budget, brought to the governor, and the governor threatened to veto, which is why we didn't pass anything on housing. So that, that's already concerning. But in the final version that we negotiated, it was it exempted or carved out any landlords who owned 10 units or less, and that includes like the owner occupied unit. So that was the final definition. I think there's on both sides, strong feelings and opinion if 10 is the right number, if it's too high or too low. We've heard from both, but 10 was the number that was agreed on. And I agree. I think we need to encourage, landlords and homeowners to stay in the neighborhood, be part of it. But what we're seeing in Astoria, what we're seeing in Long Island City, right, are a lot of large corporate landlords buying a lot of land because they want to develop, more luxury housing here. Blackstone right now is one of the biggest landlords in the entire world. And it's a private equity firm, right? And so that's what we really want to prevent. And, when it comes to like a bill like good cause eviction, it's not only trying to be fair by, it did have that carve out, but it's also trying to be fair in that from a landlord's perspective, it only applies to tenants who have, maintained the terms of their lease, have been good tenants. Like if it does not apply to any tenants who have, not paid their rent, who have broken any terms of their leases, who have damaged property, right? So it's really just applying. It's also, those people are carved out too. It's just applying to if your tenants, been a good tenant, maintained their end of the bargain, then helps them stay in the neighborhood too, because we want homeowners to be there. We want our landlords, small landlords to be there, but we also want, our tenants who have lived and been lifelong renters. I'm a lifelong renter. My mom's a lifelong renter. We want us to be able to stay in the neighborhood too, because, we help build that fabric, but right now, people are getting priced out. And so that also is impacting the quality of our ability to be able to build this community up and keep it, strong.
One other thing, one other question on housing is,
Yeah.
what do you think of the counties like Long Island and upstate and everything who refuse to participate in the affordable housing, refuse the zoning changes that the governor did try and put through? I think there is something called a fairness doctrine, which I'm well aware of because the area of Old Astoria has always been on the wrong side of that issue because we're redlined. So many public facilities and things always came into our neighborhood, but they never went out to Douglaston. They never went out to Forest Hills and places like that. So this is a similar scenario, only it's statewide. And I don't know if something could be done about that. It's frankly unconscionable to me. It's something that's very unfair. Everybody has to pull their weight. It's the same thing, I guess, with the crisis for the asylum seekers. Where again they're just leaving it to us. That's not right. Anyway, that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's actually, that type of redlining and exclusionary zoning is part of a racist history in this state. And so we need to push the suburbs and Long Island City or upstate and Long Island to build more affordable housing. And I think, the governor's plan had that mandate, but got a lot of pushback there too. It's the same people who are against tenant protections who also do not want to do their share. So we're fighting the battle on both sides. And I think it's a good thing, to mention, but also a good thing for everyone here to be aware of, because that's why we've got to keep lobbying the governor too, that she has to, we have to hold these areas accountable. And next year when we come back for housing, that's still got to be part of the plan. I think we're worried that something like that will fall out because of the pushback, but we got to organize it back in. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, good. One other last thing that we came up with that we were discussing was the problem with places like Rikers Island and our justice system. To us, the bottleneck is the courts.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not about if you have turnover, if somebody is arrested and they immediately go to court and they're either exonerated or they go to jail, one way or the other. But they're not sitting in a facility like Rikers Island for years, and this is simply because of the court system. So what can be done? You wouldn't need to. You worry about the population in Rikers Island. The easiest way to reduce it is to cut the stay to a week for everybody. So why aren't we building more courts? Why aren't we electing more judges? I mean, that to me, why aren't we funding the public defenders the way we should? That's ridiculous, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. And so I don't know if that's ever brought up, in Albany, but I do think that to me or to us, it's really, in a nutshell, it's the most important aspect of the whole issue.
Yeah, 100%. I visited Rikers this year. I was talking to some of the incarcerated folks there, some of the, corrections officers, and I asked, what's the longest you've seen someone here waiting trial? Longest they saw was 6 years. 6 years sitting in Rikers and not ever convicted of a crime, right? That is remarkable and unacceptable. And the day after I left, I also, once again, was reinforced about how poor the conditions are at Rikers Island because there was a massive fire. And even 2 of the incarcerated folks that we had personally seen as elected officials were harmed. They ended up in the infirmary because of it. So, it's not the safest place. We're not investing in our courts. And I think that's one of the biggest things we talked about is if you want a more just system, invest in the courts, invest in our public defenders. We did put a little bit more money this year, but certainly not enough. And then also, we've been organizing in Astoria. We do want to see Rikers close. It's not getting, even the people working there said, we're not getting the investment we need. We're expecting to close. We're supposed to be closing, so we're not upgrading things. So now you have an even less safe environment than how people are, being subjected to. And so it was remarkable to me that instead of fixing the courts, all of that, instead, the governor was really focusing on actually increasing the population of people waiting for pretrial in pretrial detention. Again, that is not what we need. That is not going to solve the issue. And it's not real public safety. If you're 80% of these people are Black and brown New Yorkers, are working class, and the vast majority don't end up. I think over 90% do not end up getting convicted of a violent crime. So you are actually talking about a safer population, even though the narrative doesn't always reflect that. And those are people whose lives are disrupted. They're losing their jobs. They're not paying rent, right? They're not able to go to school during that time. So it's also a public safety issue if you think about it, because Black and brown working class New Yorkers have their lives, and more of them, because of this year's budget, getting disrupted, and then not able to come back and integrate back into society. It's incredibly disruptive. It puts us at a disadvantage. And so I'd love to see real public safety by investing in our communities and our courts. And I'm really glad that you brought that up as well.
Mhm. Good. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks for your great responses. I know you have to go at 7:00, so would you like to give information to everybody on where your office is, how you can be reached, anything pertinent information? And if you want to put it in the chat, just put it in the private chat, and our host, Talisha, will put it in the screens for everybody to see. You can do
Got
that.
it. Thank you. Yes. So we, as I mentioned, have a tri-borough district. It's the only one. And we just opened our office near Grand Central, about a couple blocks away. And we wanted to make sure that it was easy for everyone to get to. So we have a transit hub nearby. Should be easy for Astoria to get to as well. And we're open. We're fully operational. Come visit us. We can share the address. And we'll go ahead and do that. I have a community affairs team that has been working on cases every single day, everything from unemployment to housing issues to even helping, even if it's not something our level of government deals with, whether it's an immigration case or something like you see a pothole in the street, still reach out to us. We'll work with a city council member, who has been really good about those infrastructure issues too. So please, anything that you need, we're here, we're operational. You can reach out. Our email is gonzalez@nysenate.gov, gonzalez@nysenate.gov and .gov. And, we'll also be, through our social media, be posting, which is the same, Gonzalez 4NY. We'll be posting about our events, posting about community actions that are happening around some of the issues we talked about. So we also have a newsletter. You can sign up for that. There are a lot of ways to stay involved, a lot of ways to stay engaged. And I really do hope, if you have any questions, you reach out to us. But I hope to see the folks who are tuned in today in the community this year. And again, I just want to thank you for the time and space to come and update you all, because we have been working on some important issues.
Yeah. Good. Well, hopefully we'll see you at the fireworks on Thursday.
Yes.
In Astoria Park.
Amazing. I love this time of year. The fireworks are always gorgeous. So also a plug for anyone on this call, go to the fireworks so we can all see each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Okay. It's good to see you again. And anytime you want to check in, please do. Okay.